When you have a God that so loved the world, he sent the thing he loved most in this world for us so we could have a relationship with him. You know your God is loving. And so you know, even if you're in a season right now where you feel like you're hearing the word no, or you feel like God is saying no to something you really want and you don't know why, just as my friend said, there is an I love you in the no's, not just the yeses, but there's an I love you in the no's, in the not right now, in the not yet, in the not ever. There's an I love you there. And honestly, I think it's in those moments we experience so much more of God's love. It's one thing for a parent to love a child enough to give them what they want that's going to make them really happy, and that makes that parent happy. It says another thing about a parent's love for a kid when they restrain from giving because all they want to do is love that kid, and the kid does not understand that them saying no is loving them. I believe every single person has a ministry. Ministry isn't just for preachers and it's not just for pastors. It's the way you shine the light that God gave you through his spirit in all spaces that he's trusted you to walk. That means you on your college campus. That means you at your corporate job. That means you in high school. That means you with your friends at the bar or the restaurant. That means you wherever you are. You have the responsibility to shine God's light in that space, and you get the chance to. Friend, you are beautiful, you are worthy, and you are made to shine. Friends, we are literally sitting here eating pickles. I'm sorry if one, you're like my sister and have one of those diseases where when people make crunchy noises with their mouth because they're eating food, you freak out. You probably heard a crunch or two because I just ate a pickle. 2, I'm sorry if you hate pickles. And the idea of someone snacking, just snacking on a pickle, like the pickle is not combined with any other form of food. It's not part of a broader palate. It's just a pickle. Freaks you out. I understand. But I recently have been obsessed with snacking on pickles. And I can't tell you where this came from. Can't tell you. But when I was little, like a little girl, I remember my mom used to tell me my great grandma loved snacking on pickles. And I really liked my great grandma. And so I started snacking on pickles. And then I just kind of stopped. And lo and behold, about 2 decades later, at 26, we are now bringing back the trend. Actually, what happened was, for some reason, the only thing I had in my fridge was pickles. And I was like, I'm really hungry, but I don't want a full meal. I just kind of want to, I just want a little something. And we opened up that jar and we dug in. Not the sweet pickles. I'm not a sweet pickle girl. It's dill or nothing. It's dill or nothing. Sweet is just too much for me. There was also, let's paint this picture. I was coming up from church the other day. I was like, you know what? I really liked snacking on pickles the other day. I'm going to go to Whole Foods just for the purpose of purchasing pickles. No other intention. I just want to go make a pickle purchase. And so I go into Whole Foods to make my pickle purchase. And then I was like, well, I don't want that lady. I didn't know where the jars of pickles were in Whole Foods. And I promise there's a point to this. Actually, you know what? There's not. I have no idea how I'm going to tie this into the message for today, but we're going to. But I was like, I don't even know where they have pickles at Whole Foods. And I looked everywhere and there was nowhere I could find pickles. So I went to the salad bar and just scooped a bunch of pickles in a plastic cup. And I was like, man, this girl's going to think I'm crazy who's checking me out. So I need something else to purchase to complement this. I can't just go to a store and make a pickle purchase. I need something else. So I saw okra. This one, I don't know why I thought that would make the situation and my purchasing experience less judged by bystanders looking in. But I filled up 2 plastic big Whole Foods tubs of pickles and okra. And the lady was like, oh, are you hosting a charcuterie party? I was like, yeah. No, I was not hosting a charcuterie party. And was that lying? I think it was just misleading her falsely to the conclusion I am a sane person and had a purpose for purchasing pickles and okra other than just wanting to eat them. Anyways, today I am crunching on pickles while I'm coming at you for this My Heart to Yours Thursday. I'm actually really excited to talk about what we're talking about today, because recently I was in a conversation with a friend, and she's going through a really hard time. Going through a season where, and maybe you're in a season like this, or if you're not, you're going to go through this because we're all humans and going through humanity. But basically, the way that her life looks right now isn't how she thought it was going to look. Going through a really tough breakup, thought this was the one. And you just we all, whether it's a breakup where you lose the guy or the girl that you thought was the one, we all have those things in our life we thought were the one. That one job we thought was going to get, the one internship opportunity we thought was it for our summer, that one friend that we thought was going to be there throughout the course of our life, or be there for our engagement, or be a good maid of honor, or be a good godmother, or whatever have you, that one capability in our body to move a certain way, to do a sport a certain way until you get injured and can't do it anyway. No matter if it's a breakup or a breaking of just what you thought, we all have those ones in our life. Or basically it's like this breakup of what we thought was going to happen with what actually is happening. And she said something to me. Now, I love this person with my heart, and she's so profound in my opinion, and in other people's opinion too. But she said something to me that I was like, wow, you need to cross stitch that on a pillow, because that was so beautiful. And I wasn't even the one that needed encouragement. She was just speaking truth. But she said, Annie, what I'm learning right now is that there's an I love you in the no's. When God says no, there is an I love you in that no. I was watching the Minions movie this weekend. And there's this, y'all know the character who's like, it's so fluffy, like the little girl that's so cute and has a ponytail on the top of her head. And she had this, she had this pet goat, Lucky, that she had to be separated from. And she was just asking that not to happen. Dad, please don't separate us. Please don't separate us. And I think what's so wild is you look at this movie and you look at this little girl, and you know that she had to be separated from her pet goat, Lucky, because her family was under threat, right? It was good for her to have that separation to protect her, but she doesn't see that. All she sees is she's being separated from this thing that she loves so much, which is her pet goat. And that sounds childish, but the through line is, when God takes things from our life, all of a sudden we almost peg him as this bad God or this bad guy or this bad parent, because it's how could you let this happen to me? But God has this vision that goes so much broader than what we see, than what we know to be true. He has X-ray vision into people's hearts, into situations' hearts, into the future of situations, into the past of situations. God has a perspective that we will never be able to have. And so there is an I love you in the no. Think of, and what my sister said is, I think it breaks God's heart when we want something to work so bad. And she told me, she was like, I prayed for this guy to be my guy, for it to work, for the engagement to go through, for him to propose, for the marriage to work once we did. I prayed every night for that, and it still didn't work. And I just think that was such a powerful thing she said, because so many of us think we did all that and God must hate us and he doesn't even care that it hurts us, that it didn't work out. But how do you answer the question, believing that God could do something, but he isn't doing something? Believing God can do something, but you don't know if he's willing. And I think it goes back to what my friend said, which is, my sister friend said, which is, there is an I love you in the no's. There is an I love you when God says, not for you. And I think it breaks God's heart. Can you imagine? I was telling my boyfriend last night, because we were talking about this exact thing. And I was like, if that little girl from the Minions movie with the goat was oh my God, Annie, please don't separate me from my goat. Please don't separate me from my goat. It would break my heart to have to look her in their eye and say, honey boo, I have got to separate you from your goat. Like, that would break my heart. It did break my heart when Gru basically had to separate her from her pet goat. That broke my heart for her. And I think that's how God is. When we want something so bad, but out of his love for us, he says no. Not just out of his love for us. He's not just saying no because he knows what's better for us. He's also saying no, knowing his heart is breaking because he knows we don't have that perspective. And we have a God that's willing to prevent us from getting in a worse situation, go through a temporary hurt for long-term fulfillment, and risks us being mad at him because he loves us more than us being mad at him. And I just think that's something we forget. And this past week, I do my Pilates in my apartment. I can't go to a gym, and I'll tell you why. One, the movements for my P-Vol friends out there that have started it, it's awesome, but sometimes they look a little funky when you're not in like a P-Vol community where everyone's doing said Taekwondo movements. It's not Taekwondo. It's a lot less cool than that. But I was at the beach doing it with my family, and my cousins and brother, they were making so much fun of me because they really do. They look so like karate, but in slow movement. Great for hip mobility. All that to say, I do it in my apartment for that reason. And because sometimes when I'm working out, I get so many ideas for this podcast and I just I talk to God, quite frankly. I will talk out loud. And for some reason, I was doing my little movements. It's a whole vibe. If you walked into my apartment at 4, 5, 6 a.m. and I'm doing my P-Volve, doing my hip mobility rotations, talking to God, it's a whole vibe. But I was, for some reason, John 3:16 kept coming in my brain. And I'll be honest, John 3:16, so powerful. Obviously, for God so loved the world, he sent his one and only son to die so that we might, oh gosh, am I botching John 3:16? I think I literally just botched John 3:16. That's pitiful. Okay, yeah. So for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Like, that verse is used so much and cross-stitched so much on things that I think we forget the power of what it actually means. And so when God kept bringing it up in my mind as I was doing P-Volve, I was like, why? And so I sat in it. And I felt like God just say, slow it down. And when you go in hard situations, to have hope that you're going to get on the other side, you have to have hope in something that's good, that's outside of your situation. That's our hope, is in Jesus. Jesus is good, and he's outside of our situation. John 3:16, God so loved. Those 3 words, I literally was doing P-Volve, and I created like a whole sermon in my brain on those 3 words. God. Your situation begins with God. Your entirety begins with God. Your heartbreak, your story, your redemption, your hope, your goodness, your kindness, your lovingness, your gentleness, your patience, your everything begins with God. You began with God. You also end with God. God is the Alpha and he's the Omega. He's the beginning and he's the end. He's also the God of the in-between. Why is that important? Whenever you go through a situation and you feel like God is saying no, or God is saying yes, or you don't know why God allowed something to happen, or you feel like God isn't saying anything and you're like, God, where are you? I would delight in anything from you because you feel so distant. You have to know it begins with God. You can't lose God when it began with him. What began with him? Life, everything. God so loved the world. God. If it starts with God, what's the next logical question to ask yourself if you're living a life that started with God? What is this God like? Who is he in relation to me? How does he see me? If this is the God that writes my story, that says no to me, that is the one responsible for taking away my pet goat when I love my pet goat so much? Why? Like, who is this God in relation to me? God so loved. That tells me two things in those three words. God so loved. One, it begins with God. Two, so loved. He's a loving God. When you know your life begins with God, it ends with God. God's in the middle. God's all around it. He is a caramel apple. He is all of it. He's the apple. That was a really weird analogy, but we're going to go with it. He's smothered all over you. He's in you. He's behind you. He is beside you. He's all around you. He's in your situations you don't even know are going to happen. Situations you know are going to happen. Like, he's in all of it. God so loved. He's a loving God. Love goes before you. Love goes behind you. Love goes beside you. Love goes all around you and within you and through you. So loved also tells me he's an active God. Job 19:25, my Redeemer lives. He's personal. Redeemer. He's a God that gives hope, lives. He's active. So many of us, I think, feel as if, like, God, who does God says who he is? He told Moses, I am. I am is present. I am is current. So many of us act as if God is this thing that's in the past, or we're not inviting God into our present, or we're living our life as if we are the God of tomorrow and we are the God of future situations, and the actual God who isn't in that. He's only in that, or the past, or the right now. We limit God to these different subsets of our life instead of saying he is the freaking God of everything. I used to get really nervous about traveling. I'm not a good traveler. I've had I will say, in my defense, I've had some very unique travel situations. This ties very nicely to PVolve, which I just explained. There is a equipment in PVolve called the P-Ball. No, not the P-Ball, the P3 trainer. And one of the pieces of this equipment looks like a bomb. It just does. And I don't travel a lot. And so I traveled and brought this bomb looking piece of equipment with me on a carry-on because I didn't think to check it or didn't think it'd be a problem that it looked like a skeptical blowing up tool. So I was like, that was traumatic. I mean, they thought that I was so questioned, and I was going on like a work trip, and it was traumatic. Anyways, all that to say, I would get so freaked out when I would have travel coming up that required like planes. Like, I genuinely was so freaked out by it. Of like, what could go wrong? I always get lost. I told myself all these stories. And this was like last year. This was not 10 years ago, and I'm now delivered. This was literally like last year. And I think what's so important to recognize, though, is so many times as believers, we trust God. We trust if we believe in God, we'll get to heaven. We trust God is the God that is redeeming our past, but we don't trust his timing. We trust him to make sense of the past, to bring hope and light to the past, but we don't trust him with the future, with that next trip we're going on, with that next relationship we're going to be a part of, with our current day. You know, I was talking to my friend going through this situation, and I was opening up to her about, like, even for me right now, there's so many things in my life, relationships, friendships, where insecurities that have been there for years, I mean decades, from when I've gotten hurt in the past by like previous boyfriends or previous friends. I've had so many good girlfriends that we got in these massive fights, and just, well, not so many, like maybe 2 times this has happened in my life. I was really good friends with someone, and then we got in these fights, and we've literally not spoken since. And now what I've realized is anytime I have a good girlfriend in my life, there is this fear that's going to happen again. And what's crazy is all the time can go by in the world, but if you don't heal parts of you and bring those parts of you to Jesus that you need to be healed, it's just going to stay there. It's going to stay covered up. And I think so many of us, we're so terrified of looking at that for ourselves, that pain, that heartbreak, whatever it is, that we never bring it to the front. We never bring that emotion to the light. We never see it. We never look at it. God isn't shocked by your humanity. The little girl in Minions didn't try to convince herself it didn't hurt her when she was separated from her pet goat. She told her father how much it hurt her. Did she still have to experience that separation? Yeah. But in the process of telling her father, she put that hurt in the open to be addressed. When you have a God that so loved the world, he sent the thing he loved most in this world for us so we could have a relationship with him. You know your God is loving. And so even if you're in a season right now where you feel like you're hearing the word no, or you feel like God is saying no to something you really want and you don't know why, just as my friend said, there is an I love you in the no's, not just the yeses. But there's an I love you in the no's, in the not right now, in the not yet, in the not ever. There's an I love you there. And honestly, I think it's in those moments we experience so much more of God's love, because it's one thing for a parent to love a child enough to give them what they want that's going to make them really happy, and that makes that parent happy. It says another thing about a parent's love for a kid when they restrain from giving something a child wants that isn't going to be good for them long term, willing for that child to be upset with them, maybe even say things that hurt them, because all they want to do is love that kid, and the kid does not understand that them saying no is loving them. That's another deeper, I think more intimate kind of love. I was listening to a podcast the other day about like sexual boundaries and like boundaries in relationships. And like when you're trying to pursue a godly marriage, and it just was talking about like, it's one thing to say, I love you, and to say yes to doing all these like sexual things. And I think that in our society, we take someone saying yes to wanting to touch us, wanting to be with us, wanting to kiss us as them loving us. But it's a whole different kind of love when you're pursuing a godly marriage for them to say no. Like, I love you so much, I'm not going to touch you like that. I love you so much. I love this relationship so much. And I want to honor the Lord in this so much. Like, I'm going to set this boundary and I'm going to say no. And even like in conversations with friends or family, it's like saying no, the I love you behind that is sometimes so much greater than the yeses, because it's this willingness to say, hey, no, I'm not going to keep putting off this conversation that we need to have, even though it might be uncomfortable. I'm not putting this off. I'm not going to be passive. I'm going to bring it to you, because there's an I love you in that. There's an I love you in saying, no, I'm not going to be the kind of friend that can be with you all moments of the day, because when I am with you, I want to be fully present. So no, I can't do that for you. There's an I love you in saying no. Like if you have a family member that is so used to you doing everything for them, there is an I love you behind no. I'm not doing that for you. I will support you, but I'm not going to enable you to not do this for yourself. The I love you behind the no's. If you're in a no season or feel like you've heard no, whether that's God saying, no, you're not dating that guy. No, you're not going to that job. No, you feel like you're just hitting a ceiling, hitting a wall every time with a boy or with a relationship or with a girl, with a friendship. Like there's an I love you behind that. And we feel that and recognize that, appreciate it when we know that for God so loved. God starts it, he ends it, and he's a loving God that's active. He's not saying no and it's just going to leave you. He's actively saying no because there's actively something he's working on that he wants you to say, to be able to say yes to. Dear Lord, I pray for these people. I pray that for every no in their life, they truly believe that the God who's behind that no is a God that's loving. And so there's a reason there's a no. And that they get to know you and your heart. And they are so sensitive and keenly aware of the love behind the no. I pray that we see the love behind the no. In Jesus' name. Amen. And I hope that this blessed you and encouraged you, reminded you that God gave you a unique light, and it is your job to shine it in this world because we need you to. That being said, if you were blessed by this message and you can think of anybody else that also needs this type of encouragement, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment. It helps me out a lot and helps this message that I do believe God gave my heart to share with the world gets out. I hope you have such an amazing rest of your day.